explain this to your sellers. Explain why and how that you're not going to literally track them down at their house to find the feedback, because you want positivity rolling forward.
Yeah.
So really, really super important that you're doing that. But there's different methods of communication, the text videos, the bomb videos, being able to email. I know a lot of different ways that you can be emailing for feedback. But for me, none of that starts until 24 hours out. I am a helper until 24 hours out from that showing.
Yeah. Hey guys, welcome back to Realestatable, your go-to podcast for raw, real, and relevant information in the real estate world. I don't know about you guys, but I have been struggling to get some feedback on my listings, and it's just driving me bonkers.
I just can't get agents to answer.
Same.
Like, struggling with agents answering for sure. So we're going to dive in today to go over some real life experiences and some strategies to help you move the ball forward for those listings that are maybe sitting there a little bit longer than normal. Anyone else feel like they can maybe relate to this?
I'm sure everybody can right now.
Literally everyone. All right. Well, let's take a listen.
All right. So like we said in the intro, we're talking about getting feedback as the listing agent. And maybe we can even dive into a little bit talking about giving feedback as a buyer's agent.
Yeah. So I kind of relate to this from a standpoint of a buyer's agent. I'm not super forthcoming with feedback unless my buyers have made a decision. So I think that people that are experienced in this industry will be a little bit more close guarded if their buyers are still waiting to decide whether or not they're offering on a property. And so if you're anything like us, I think that's taking way longer than normal for that to happen. So the strategies that we're going to talk about today are going to be from the mindset of a seller's agent. But really, when you're thinking about how do you perform as a buyer's agent, I think in good practice, you should be withholding really an opinion and in a lot of the feedback that would be useful to sellers until your buyers make a decision. So with that in mind, we're going to dive into just really what is the importance? Why is this important for us as sellers agents? What is the importance of feedback?
Well, I mean, first off, sellers want to know what these buyers are thinking. Did they, sellers are taking time out of their day to pack up their family, kids, pets, work from home people, it's disrupting, etc. So it's like, you want to get the feedback for your sellers so that they know why they left the house.
Yeah.
Even if it's bad feedback, it's something, and, it might help sell the house down the line.
Well, and I think it's a way to help improve your listings too. So I know depending on your strategy on prepping and preparing listings, which we've talked about in depth in episodes previous, depending on your strategy for that, you might need some help. And I think if your listings are sitting, guess what? You do need some help. You need to know why and how you're comparing to others. So I think that, it matters because it can help you improve your listing and ultimately for future showings, get you a closed deal.
I also think getting feedback starts to help you understand the market trends. I know back when COVID was happening and it was like a crazy buyer bidding wars and all of that. I was constantly reaching out to listing agents because I was very buyer heavy at that time. And I was reaching out to listing agents just being like, hey, what kind of offers are you accepting? What ended up getting accepted? Or not so much for people who are like outside the office or team, like people that I could collaborate with, and just kind of ask those questions to find out like, okay, we're not offering enough, we're not doing enough, or whatever it is to win. So that kind of put me at a competitive edge, at least during the COVID time, but it still applies today because if you're on the buying side or the listing side, more so one or the other, it gives you that opportunity to talk about what's going on in the market.
Yeah, I think all of that. I mean, I think just across the board, we know that it matters. We know that this is important, having great strategy to be effective in this. And I think that so much of what we've done in really coming out of a COVID market, low interest market, we've not had to do this. Like there was not even an opportunity for us to call and raise our hand for feedback. And so I think it's kind of training and strategizing these buyer's agents to get what you're needing, and really training them to know that you're on the other end as a helping agent to help them get a deal closed. So I think that when you're looking at it this way and your strategy that we're going to talk about, setting up expectations for sellers is super important. So the
Yes.
expectation of they're not going to see them close the door in the ring camera and expect that you're having showing feedback within any amount of seconds, minutes, hours of that time frame. Setting the expectation of when they can expect to hear from you on feedback is super important. Like
Yeah.
honestly, the number one step, like we're talking about this before we even talk about how are you getting this feedback, is setting up the expectation of when and how that's going to be delivered to the sellers. I think we both can say
Yeah.
very, very recent history that
Yes.
this has been such a pain point that it's just like, dude, it's how in any realm of possibility is instant communication getting you actual thoughtful feedback?
It's not.
Never.
That's the answer.
It's not.
I've recently had a couple sellers here who have wanted feedback like immediately. How did it go? What do they think? Are they going to offer? Da, 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 da. Like just rapid fire questions. And for a while I was getting the feedback right away, but the feedback was very vanilla. Oh, they didn't like the location. Oh, the backyard. Oh, the driveway is sloped. Oh, this or that. And it's nothing that the seller can change. Like that's not constructive feedback. Yes, sometimes those things are factors that mattered, but I think just talking with your seller, letting them know, "Hey, I'm going to follow up in X amount of hours or within 24 hours or whatever it is." Just let them know and kind of explain why. Like, hey, buyers don't make a decision right away. They're going to sleep on it. They're going to see 10 more homes tomorrow or whatever it is. You might not have immediate feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the expectations of sellers is going to take the stress off of you for really that the instant response
Mm-hmm.
time. So we want to kind of talk about the strategy of starting the feedback process the minute you have a scheduled showing. So this is kind of a light bulb moment for us in this current market, but I think it stemmed from just a casual check-in. I scheduled a showing. It was about an hour out, and I had an agent check in with me to just say, thanks for showing 123 Short Street. The lockbox is located here. If there was a code, just setting me up for success and let me know if you have any questions. And that sat really, really well in the sea of us now showing how many houses in comparison to the ones and twosies and make an offer quick. It's a little bit more overwhelming to go on a buyer tour, which agents who have been in the business are rolling their eyes because I remember, showing weeks on end coming out of the recession, weeks on end and months of a decision-making process. But you were conditioned for that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not conditioned for that, even those that have been in the business for a long time. And so for me, going back to the marathon versus the sprint, it was refreshing. And so we're suggesting to you one of the things that we've changed the way that we are setting our sellers up for success is by being a helping listing agent. So
Mm-hmm.
you're a helper. You want to be there to make the showing process easy. You want to be accessible, which means you actually have to be accessible. You want to remind them that you're there to answer the phone. And so whatever that looks like, and for Ashlee and I, that's two different things, but whatever that looks like, whether it's an immediate response once they've scheduled a showing, which could be for tomorrow, the next day, tonight, etc. Or it might be a window right before the showing. So you're just checking in with them if I can answer any questions. Maybe you're providing a resource of key features of the property. Maybe you're reminding them how they can submit feedback if they wanted to do that while they were there during the showing. Maybe you're reminding them about access information, so providing a link to the MLS that has all of the disclosures.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that you do that I feel like that kind of outlines everything you
Mm-hmm.
could be pre-checking in for, but anything else to add to that?
I also send a link to the property
Yeah.
video. That way they have, kind of like a walkthrough or a refresher for maybe they're sleeping on it. The agent can send them the video and they'll say, oh, I remember that kitchen or whatever.
And see, I do that as for post follow-up. So you could do that
Mm,
before, you could do that during, after,
yeah.
etc. So I do the reminder check-in afterwards with the video. But really, any of those things leading up to the showing, do you check in with them during that showing window? Do you check? I
No,
don't
I
either.
don't.
I know that the agents that have done that becomes overzealous. It's like you're trying to focus in and having an effective showing. So
Yeah.
we personally do not check in. Like, let's say it's an hour window, there's no communication, but maybe 15 minutes before that starts, an hour,
Mhm.
2 hours, the time of booking, etc., you have actually checked in with them beforehand. So,
Yeah.
and that could be a whole list of things that you're doing prior to.
Yeah, even the 15 minutes before you can say, "Hey, I know you're headed to your showing right now. Um, I'll be available for any questions, call or text me."
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
letting you know that, okay, I'm actually working in real estate. I actually care about my listing and I'm trying to sell it.
Yes. Yep. And then being available during showings,
Yes.
just to be
As best
sure.
as you can, sometimes you can't get to the phone when they're at the property. But
I usually
most of
will
the
tell
time.
them, and sometimes I will say that though. So if I know I'm in an unavailable hour during their showing, I'll provide our TC's number. I'll say, you can even call like the next in line agent. Like there's an
Mhm.
ability to say Ashley's there to have, an answering to be able to answer the phone. If you're going to be completely unavailable, putting your second in line person as availability is maybe not a bad idea. Now, if this is a super experienced agent that's showing, probably not as important as we're working a deal right now with someone doing their second transaction
Mm.
that has been multiple phone calls a day leading up to the offering of his client. So depending on who it is, maybe that's important, maybe it's not. So
What would you think about because I know like people start to ask for feedback and I'm guilty of this too. So I'm like I've not given feedback before even though I'm like preaching to everyone now like give feedback and help these sellers. But what do you think about like what do you think the balance is for how persistent you should be for feedback?
so two things. As a buyer's agent, and again, courtesy I think is going way further in this
Yes.
industry right now. Two parts of this. If my buyer has made a decision, because sometimes we are at the end of the roll and they follow up the next day and we have made a decision, I will always be forthcoming. I'll always make sure that I extend that courtesy. I also, if I'm not ready to give feedback, and a lot of times there's not even anything that I'll want to say if they haven't made a decision,
Mhm.
I'll just provide that courtesy to tell them that. So I always try to respond, whether it's 4 seconds after we're done, the next day or whenever. I try to, as a buyer's agent, always give that response. And it could be, hey, I'm not ready, but if you poke me in the next 4 to 5 days, we're taking a little bit longer or whatever. So
I have a question.
yeah,
Out of curiosity, what happens if you put off the feedback and then you're like, someone says, "Hey, can I get feedback on 123 Short Street?" And you're like, "What property is that?"
I feel so. Yes and no.
I got blindsided by a phone call the other day. I
Oh
had been out
gosh.
showing probably like 5 or 6 houses and he's like, "What did you think of Short Street?" And I was like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure
Remember?
they didn't like it. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I did end up remembering as I like started to talk to him. I'm like, is the one on the cul-de-sac or did they have the red door or whatever? And so I did figure it out, but yeah, I was like really caught off guard.
Well, sometimes into if because doing better at answering phone calls,
Yeah,
being getting quick responses. So if that did happen, so role play on that.
yeah,
I am currently with someone and I couldn't tell you what 123 Short Street is, but I'm really good at remembering what they look like. Can you send me a link to the MLS? And I'll be happy to provide that feedback to you. I don't even think that's a bad idea, whether or not you are in person or not.
hmm,
I tend to have vomit of the mouth, where I'm like, way too much information. And I probably need to draw it back to a text message. So good practice could just be, hey, no problem. I'll be happy to provide that feedback. Send me a link so I can make sure I'm referencing the correct property. I'm with working multiple clients right now, multiple showing tours, etc. And make them push that into a text message just to
yeah,
be sure. So I don't know. I don't know that I've ever forgot. So for me, I'm like, don't tell me 123 Short Street. Tell me the gray house with the red
yes,
door.
yeah.
So I don't know that I've ever forgotten after seeing pictures for reference.
I mean, I was on the go, like, driving, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Hi, this is Ashley," and he's like, "Hey, what did your buyers" and I was like, "Oh gosh, I don't
Uh,
even know where am I right now."
you're like, what state am I in right
What
now?
client was that? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. So I would say just kick them into text message. And then if you really don't, you really just look at it and be like, your pictures are terrible. This is, or I mean, just be honest with them and be
Yeah.
like, I have been with 37 buyers. You waited too long to check in from that.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
well, let's talk about timing and follow up. Based off of that, you need to still be top of mind, but maybe not top of the hour of the showing
Yeah.
appointment on that. So for me, timing for follow up is it. Okay, so let's use an example. They scheduled at 11 a.m. for a 1 p.m. showing. Between 11 to 1, I'm doing my follow up of thank you for showing, here's showing instructions, details, etc. From 11 to 12 is the show, or sorry, from 1 to 2 is the showing window. At the end of that showing window, as close as possible, I am thanking them from showing and I'm sending the video follow up. So that's
Mhm.
when I personally send the video. We do property videos on everything. It gives us more engagement in our YouTube. I'm sending that YouTube link and I'm saying if they need a reminder or a refresher, here's the property video. Feel free to share this with your client. If you have questions, let me know, period. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not asking for anything else. I'm just a helping hand because they are feeling the same way that we are as buyer agents. So,
Well,
uh,
and it's hard too because if you have a seller who's wanting the feedback within 5 seconds of the showing and you calm them down and you're like, "I'm going to get it within 24 hours. I'm going to try to get it." But then the agent doesn't respond. And then it's like, what do you say? What do you do? Because you don't want to bash anyone, obviously, but you also want to say, "Hey, I don't have the feedback at this time. I don't
yeah.
wasn't able to reach them." And I feel like sometimes sellers get discouraged when they hear, "Oh, this agent didn't give feedback. This agent didn't show up for their showing. They're late," or whatever it is. Kind of just puts a salty taste in your mouth, you
Oh,
know?
100%. So you find where they live.
Find where they live. Where do you work?
No, not where you work. We just are escalating it to where do you live. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's, maybe up front when you're setting up expectations to say, I'm going to be able to get less than 50% of a response. And that is just the nature of the intensity and the velocity of showing agents right now. This is my plan to make sure that I ensure success. So you can outline what your plan is. You can do all of the things to outline what you're able to control, which is you, and your attempts for that. I always, when I do that follow up text, I will say, hey, I have checked in with the agent that just showed, provide the value, whatever that value box looks like, and I will let you know when I hear from them. I'm going to make my second attempt to touch base with them, which Ashlee already, spoiler alert, is 24 hours after that showing is
Yeah.
done. So I'm going to assume that if they are interested, we're going to hear from them in that 24 hours, which wouldn't you say pretty much 100% of the time, if there's any interest,
Mhm.
they're going to say, my buyers love this house. We're going to look at two more. My buyers this. So that
Yeah.
if there's interest, and maybe prepare your sellers for this, that if there's interest, they're communicating back because they're going to want to start that working relationship with me too.
Yeah.
So almost no answer is your answer and preparing your sellers for that. But the majority of the time, a yes is going to receive a response from not, can I have feedback? Because remember, good buyers agents probably aren't going to provide that, but from a place of thank you for sending this. And I'm looking forward to being able to possibly send you an offer.
Yeah.
What would you say that you add to that? So follow up for you, what does that look like after the showing's done?
Well, I'm trying a lot of different things because I have a couple listings that aren't moving, and I'm trying to get feedback like crazy.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying a few different avenues. I just did one where I sent out a video, just asking for a review, something that's constructive, something that the seller could do or offer versus a location or a certain thing that's not able to be changed.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's been the most frustrating thing for my sellers is that, okay, great, we're having a ton of showings, but it's the same feedback and there is absolutely nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, the same thing through the process. So I think if that's happening, and if you're hearing, okay, so we're going to use the example, real life example for Ashlee right now. She has a listing
Mhm.
that is on an S curve. It's kind of a blind driveway entrance ish, the way you want to look at it. And that has just been consistent feedback. The slope of the driveway and the curve of the road.
Yep.
What the heck is this seller going to do about it? There's like nothing that can be done for that. So, strategizing with that scenario and a nothing can be done, I would then go back when you get that, whether it's text or phone call that you're hearing that from, be like totally relatable.
Yeah.
That hasn't been an issue for my client. She actually loves the fact that she has a hidden driveway. So it is a little bit more private of an area. So what's the positive that you could kick back? Totally relatable, totally understand. If we could provide any constructive feedback from in comparison to taking away those two negatives, which are deal breakers for your client, totally get it. If we could provide some constructive feedback for anything else and comparing apples to apples for all of the rest of the houses that you showed, is there anything that would be positive or negative or things that my seller could control that we would love to hear that? And I get it, it's not for you, but in this business right now, and this is just a conversation that you're having with them, just to make sure that you have like ring out every single possibility of getting the yes from those that wouldn't be a no for.
Yeah.
Not necessarily positive response on that, but we're doing everything that we can, right?
Yeah.
Everything that you can do for that. Have you found that that's gotten any other feedback, or are you just starting that?
It has not gotten any other feedback because it started showings have started to slow down. So I haven't had as much of an opportunity to use that video. And I'm also like, do I want to send out a video to all these local people? I don't know,
And what she's talking about is a video that she shoots to ask for feedback. So they're getting a dropped video in their text messages, which we have talked.
Yes, that's what makes me like, oh.
We've talked mixed reviews on this. There's an agent in our marketplace that does this consistently, and it's like, do you not know how to type with your fingers and only videotape? But
he only like sends videos of himself talking. Like, this is just a one-time thing. If they text me back, I'm not gonna like video be like, oh, thank you so much for that. No, I'm gonna text back. But I think like
you're just trying to use different approaches to get a response.
I'm trying to think that like, okay, if a video text message comes through, what's the likelihood of someone watching it? And I can tell with BombBomb, you're able to tell how long someone watched it, if they watched the whole thing, 1 second.
So you're not just sending a text video, you're doing it through BombBomb so you can, like stalker status.
Yeah, because I like to track and measure, ma'am.
See, for me, I'm like, quick and easy, done. Let's hope it hits someone.
Yeah, no, I'm like, did they watch it? I mean, I even do that, like, side note, this is off topic, but like when I do all those videos explaining the documents.
Yes. Yeah.
I pay attention to how much do they watch, because I'm like, if you're watching 3 seconds, you don't care. If I see how fast the document came through, yes, I'm explaining it verbally, but I do like to make a video kind of line by line-ish, summary style of what you're signing. But like, if you're not watching it, I'm not taking the 5 minutes to make that video anymore. I'm not keeping my makeup on at 8:00 at night to make this video for you if you're not going to watch it, like that's, I know that's bad, but my clients are still getting the explanation. It's just not via video.
It's not via video and all the extraness on that. For me, I'm just shooting a video if I'm doing that. But I think that you have to balance persistence with respect to the buyer's agent. And you also have to look to see, they're the avenue, the advocate to get you an offer. And so if you start to put a bad taste in their mouth, they're not going to remind their client about, but what about 123 Short Street? They're moving on because they really have no interest in working with you. And again, explain this to your sellers. Explain why and how that you're not going to literally track them down at their house to find the feedback, because you want positivity rolling forward. So really, really super important that you're doing that. But there's different methods of communication. The text videos, the BombBomb videos, being able to email. I know a lot of different ways that you can be emailing for feedback. But for me, none of that starts until 24 hours out. I am a helper until 24 hours out from that showing. Without a doubt. Do you find that you have an auto response, an auto request? Or are you just crafting it individually, like, hey, Sam, hey, Sherry, hey?
I do individual because I personally don't like the emails that are provided by like Showing Time or whatever that get sent to you. And it's like, rate this home 5 stars, leave a comment, because you can put any amount of stars and just be done with it. And then it's like, okay, well, you gave it 5 stars, but I don't have an offer. Your buyer gave it 5 stars. What where was the miscommunication there? Where's my offer? And so I think that those are almost like too generic, where yes, you could write a text message and save it in your notes on your phone and just use that same follow-up text message for each property, have your links and everything ready to go, which feels authentic because you're sending it directly to that agent. But I feel like when you get those emails, I'm like,
Delete,
yeah.
spam, delete. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think those are as effective because it doesn't have the personal touch. It's automatic, it's robotic, it's click these 5 stars or whatever.
And do you disable those for your listings, or they still go out if the system, like if you use showing time or your MLS has a system, or some people have CRMs that do this? Do you disable that or let that go out and maybe the sprinkle of feedback will come in? Or
I'll be honest, I have no idea if my thing gets email sent out. I would
because you're getting zero response
because
lines. Yeah.
well, that's what
Yeah.
I'm going to say. My next point is like I have no idea if it's on or not because I've never once gotten
Mm-hmm.
a response. So I'm gonna hope that it's not turned on, and that I'm just like missing another touch.
Logging in to check right now.
Yeah, literally. I'm like,
well, that might not be a bad thing. Is the touches, because
Yeah.
that's the thing too. If you're doing your own organic stuff,
Yeah.
plus they're getting pinged and they're seeing 123 Short Street a bazillion times. Very, very good point as far as that goes, for sure.
Yeah.
Another idea too, because I do know like technology is a huge thing, and AI and systemizing and automating and doing all of that stuff. One of the things that we have tried and have kind of, I would say, mediocre success, but every market's different, so we're going to share a best practice, is we have in our listings a please submit your feedback. We want to know more. And there's a QR code that goes to an input form.
Mhm.
Essentially, that can be a Jot form, that can be a Google Drive form. Like there's so many different form bases that you can use. And we have set it up where, just like she's saying, some of them you give 5 stars and they move on. Well, no, our feedback QR code that's sitting at the listings, that has required fields. And I don't even think that there's stars on this. Maybe it's a 1 through 10, but not a ton. But
Yeah.
we, in doing that, say we will provide a coffee gift card if you provide feedback. So we've tried this. I think we're probably on a year of best practices with this. And we can also say that nothing is more effective than you making the personal connection and starting as a helper agent.
Yes.
That probably is receiving less than 25%. And we're literally saying we will pay you for feedback. At the very least, coming into 123 Short Street,
Mhm.
you will get a $5 coffee card, a $10 coffee card.
We probably need to switch that to like margaritas.
That's so true. Where can we get we need to know what local business has online gift cards with margaritas.
Okay.
Anyone in Clarksville, please let us know. And if not, local business, we will be your number one supporter.
We should open it if there's a need in town.
If there's a need, we're about to open a bar.
Margarita.
We're about to open a bar. Don't worry about the last episode of Secondary Businesses with Mike Hagewood. This is what's going to happen for sure. So I think that's a ton of information right off the bat. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to wrap this up and how we can loop it all together for the better of our sellers and our listings.
Are you looking for ways to become more efficient and save time in your day as a real estate agent? We've got the thing for you. We have created 18 done-for-you email templates that cover the entire process on the buying side and the selling side. The best part is that this is only $49 and includes customizable email templates for the process to get you through start to finish with your buyers and sellers. Head over to realestatable.com/email templates, and that's where you can find them.
All right, guys, welcome back. We are still talking about feedback, and we've talked a lot about how you can get feedback, how you can be a helpful agent, and kind of like setting the stage for that. But once you get the feedback, say you get some feedback that your sellers can actually take action on, like whether it's the price or the condition, what's your strategy for categorizing and analyzing feedback that you get?
So I definitely am keeping record for my listings. So, things are sitting a little bit longer. You're taking a little bit longer to get constructive feedback. You're getting feedback at a lower percentage than the total number of showings. So being able to have a reference to go back to be like, oh yeah, that's right. The third showing said the same thing. Oh, out of 10 feedback responses we've got, every single one of them is saying blah 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 blah. So making sure, and I like the idea of characterizing the responses based off of price, layout, condition, things that can be changed, other properties that we're competing against, whatever that looks like. Make sure when you're asking for feedback, you're not just saying, hey, what do your buyers think? That you actually are asking, and I try to, not what's the feedback, how are we priced in comparison to the other properties? Did did other backyards have a fence? Because like I have a listing right now that's not selling without a fence. Are we losing buyers to properties that have fences? So ask specific questions or answers, or if you have 10 previous feedbacks on one thing, that should absolutely be a qualifying question for the feedback that you're getting. Categorizing and organizing that and having some type of spreadsheet, some type of running log,
screenshots in an album.
Yeah. And any way that you can organize that to have an ongoing conversation, because every conversation should be built off of the previous with your seller. So it's compounding on that. And how can you pivot, analyze, change, redirect, adjust, any of those things? How can you actually learn from this? Like you learning from your mistakes, quote unquote, of feedback. How can you be learning from this, growing and going to get a dang contract?
Well, I also think too, sometimes when a house is consistently showing and it's getting like say no feedback, and then you get, okay, I think the house, my buyers like the house, but they think it needs to be repainted. Well, maybe your seller's like, I'm not repainting this house. Okay, well, let's pivot, and you can offer these particular buyers a credit for paint after closing, or just coming up with kind of creative ways to solve those feedback objections. I think is really helpful. But I also think sometimes it takes sellers a couple times to hear the same thing to then make a change.
Well, and I think that's why you remind.
Yes.
Feedback number 2, 6, and 7 said the same thing. We're now 6 weeks into this with consistency enough to say this has been a drawback. We need to pivot. I also remind my clients about the cost of remaining on the market versus the cost of adjusting for this feedback. So that's another way to analyze, to get the ball moving towards the actionable items being completed from that feedback. So I think that as much of an expectation of timeline being set up from the sellers, the expectation that we are going to adjust and change based off of feedback needs to be set literally at the first meeting.
Yeah.
I'm talking so much now with sellers about, not so much worried about value, but saleability and being able to pivot based off of the market. And what are the other properties that are active, that are competing, not just in that neighborhood, but in that large viewing area that you have buyers that are going to be out and looking at all of those things, and setting it up from the beginning, where you're not bottom lining, being like, okay, I'm pricing at the bottom of the market and this is the best I'm going to do. Not really setting them up for success right now, at least not in our marketplace. That's not a successful tactic that I would really sign my name up for as a professional in the selling market. No stinking way.
I think another thing too is kind of how you present the feedback to your seller, because everything is up for interpretation, right? So you don't want to come off and say, well, some of the feedback was the buyers hate all of your furniture and your color choices and your decor. Okay, well, that's very personal to the seller, and all things that will go away if a buyer purchases it. But you want to make sure that you're saying it tactfully, we prep our listings pretty well. So we've kind of already had those types of conversations as far as like decor and tucking things and paint and whatever. But don't be a jerk about it when you say it. Like my house that has a bad driveway, and I hate telling her that every single time, but that's what it is. I'm not like, hey, they said the driveway sucks. They would never buy that, I'm like, hey, they loved the backyard, but the driveway, they have small children riding bikes and they're worried they'll go into the street, or whatever feedback I can give as far as that goes. But just soften the blow. Be
Well,
nice.
I also kind of think that, because the longer you go, the more stress the sellers are
Yes.
feeling, right? So the longer you're on the market, the closer you are to the D-Day of moving, um, the closer you are to all of that stuff. I think that these are, we can talk about, oh, like this email that's sent out to them every week and this,
Mhm.
this form that they have access to and blah, 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 whatever. In any of these things, the actual verbal conversation, the phone call is honestly going to be the best bet for you
Yes.
to really be able to read the emotions, the reactions, and be able to help them get to the solution that you're looking for. You really, really should be having phone conversations. I think that nothing substitutes those, even in a text love language client, even in an email, even in a blah, 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 blah. For you to have that ability to be able to move the needle as much as possible, you're going to have to be working off of verbal cues to know how do you respond to that. And a lot of times, I mean, you're providing negative feedback. How often do you have, oh my God, it was completely amazing, priced right, top of the market, best ever. Oh, they chose a crappier
Mhm.
option. They're not. They're providing negative feedback. And so for your sellers to actually have the ability to process that, for you to be a support to their emotions that they're having with that, and then be able to provide the positive that comes out of it, great. I sometimes will start with, if I have a lot of bad news to share, I'm like, I have some pretty terrible news, some bad news, and I have some good news. Not so
Yeah.
much good news, but I have a lot of bad news. What do you want me to start with? I'll give them the control to be able to say, what do we want to start with? Or if it's like, hey, I need to drop the bomb first and then have, the pickup to the solution with the positive, then I won't even give them the choice. I'm like, I have some super bad news and I have some great news, but I'm going to start and get the bad news out of the way. And I just elevate the conversation from rock bottom to, hey, here, I'm showing you the light. We're going to
Yeah.
get to the positive of where we're going to pivot, because great, we actually have feedback. And that might even be the way you start conversations. Great news, I have some feedback. Bad news, it's terrible feedback. However you want to be looking
Yeah.
at that. But I think that we can automize our business as much as we want, as long as we want. But when you're trying to get sellers to move off of a needle,
Yeah.
unless you have a predetermined plan, you're going to have some verbal conversations, whether it is on a systematic weekly basis, whether it is as it comes, that you really are setting up with your client. But just looking at that picture and setting up the expectations, I think, is super important.
Yeah. I've definitely had to have more seller conversations this year
Oh
than
gosh,
any
yeah.
other year.
Yes. 100% for sure. I feel like we have shared a ton of personal experiences,
Mhm.
different things that have happened here in really the last year. I think that going on 18 years in business, I am seeing things now that I have not seen before. And so yeah, this last year, even for us experienced agents, we're like, oh gosh, what do we do? How do we do this better? And I think we can all learn together. So if you have some great things that are working right now in your market, I would love to hear that.
Yeah.
Like,
How are you getting feedback? How are you selling these tough to sell listings? We would love to know
please, please,
because we're
please,
struggling too.
please message us for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So we're super pumped though. Next episode, talk about next episode. Who is coming? You are not going to want to miss this. Let me tell you.
All right. So we interviewed Danny Hampton and she talked to us all about like mental health in real estate. And I feel like a few episodes ago, we were talking about burnout and just like feeling every wave of emotion in real estate. And Danny has her story is really great. So that's point number one. But she's got some really great strategies on how to manage the stress, how to balance mom life and family life and work and run a team. And I mean, everything.
And not show up at seller and buyer agents' houses as
She
well.
said she doesn't take phone calls after 8 p.m., right? Something like that. She was like, I'm off my phone at 7. I don't have calls or people know.
You're just
And
gonna
you just got to listen. I was like, teach me your ways, Danny.
You are going to want to listen. So if
Yes.
you don't already subscribe, you need to set an alert. You're going to want to hear from Danny for sure.
All right, guys. So I think that we've talked about everything and all things feedback. Again, we've been struggling getting feedback, so we figured that you guys probably are as well. And we wanted to share our best practices that we have found effective in the 2024 market.
And I think the key tip, the key takeaway is setting your sellers up for appropriate expectations. And that looks different for everyone based off of how you're going to do it. Remember, if you are doing a pre and post follow up without asking for feedback, share that with your sellers. Make sure, I know for me, I need to make sure that I'm being super clear. I also know one of my takeaways as I'm thinking through this, I just went live with a seller that has our first showing today, and I've already had the feedback explanation, expectation, conversation. I've had all of that, but not right now when it's go time.
Yeah.
And so just as I'm thinking through this, they're about to be expecting feedback because I'm sure they've slept on it and forgot. I need to be having that conversation probably a couple times, expectation conversation a couple times, for sure.
And I don't think it's a bad idea to send your seller like, hey, this is an example text that I send before every showing. And this is an example text of what I send after every showing. Just so they know. I think, again, just providing the value, showing that you're doing your job and you're not just like, oh, yeah, I quote unquote checked for feedback. They said nothing, like just share, like show them what you're doing. And that's going to elevate you as an agent. And they're going to say, hey, oh my gosh, Tiffany was so great.
She's on top of it.
She did this, this, and this for every single showing. Oh my gosh, she's amazing.
Yep. I also think that you have to remember too that you have to explain why you're not doing things.
Yes.
So they have an expectation of what you should be doing. We went into depth about why you shouldn't be doing certain things and explaining that to your sellers, just the whole full expectation. And don't expect because you've had a conversation once, like I'm day 1 on the market. If we're day 30, I'm going to have a breakdown explanation again of why this is still the most effective way to do it. But also as agents, we need to be okay with pivoting. I know for me, because I've always done it this way is no longer an applicable excuse, because that's what it is. It's an excuse. It's not an explanation. And we need to be getting with the times and really pivoting, not only with the type of people we're working with, because people are different, but this market is also different no matter where you are.
All right, guys, if you found this helpful, make sure you share it with a friend, give it a 5-star review, and you can find us everywhere on social at Realestatable.